Welcome back to Voices of the Church, where we share real stories of real faith. I'm your host, Luke Gay, and each episode we dive into the testimonies, struggles, and victories of believers who are living out the gospel in everyday life. Today's episode is part of our series, Voices of the Body, conversations that highlight how members of the Lord's Church live out their faith through real-life challenges. Our topic today is deeply personal and powerful. It is Faith Through Cancer, a Sister's Journey. I'm honored to welcome our guest, Cindy Pace, who will be sharing her story of courage, struggle, and above all, trust in God's faithfulness through one of life's most difficult battles. In Isaiah 41 and verse 10, God says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." That promise is at heart of today's conversation. So let's go ahead and step into Cindy's story. Hey, Cindy, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Could you start by sharing or introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about your background?
Sure. My name is Cindy Pace. I've been married for 33 years to Bobby. We have two daughters, Brooke and Whitney, and two sons-in-law, Logan and Mac, and we have one sweet baby granddaughter. Grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, and lived there until I went off to college at Abilene Christian and graduated from there. Once Bobby and I met and married, we moved to Lexington, Kentucky, lived there for about 5 years. Then we moved to Topeka, Kansas, lived there for a couple of years, moved to Dyersburg, Tennessee, lived there for about 3 years. And then we finally made our way to Georgia, which we now consider our home.
Well, that's amazing, and we're so blessed to have y'all here at the Central Congregation. And Bobby he's your husband is one of my elders, and I really appreciate him on our team. So stepping in to your diagnosis, I know there was probably things leading up to the cancer diagnosis, but when you were first diagnosed with cancer, what do you remember about that moment?
The moment itself takes me back and can somewhat still be emotional. I received a phone call in June of 2019. And the nurse navigator said, "Miss Pace, do you have a few minutes?" Of course, my heart stopped. And she said, "I'm very sorry to tell you, but your biopsy has come back and you have breast cancer." I was over at my mom's house at the time doing some work for her, but I had stepped out into the garage when the phone call came in. So I basically was by myself. I had to get myself together. She kept telling me to breathe deeply and just to keep listening to what she was saying. She told me that I would need to find a surgeon. There were so many things that I needed to do. I would have to have some follow-up exams. My head was spinning, and she said, "I'm just telling you these questions because you will have to think about them at some point. But right now, just remember the questions."
Hmm.
So then she asked me if there was anybody else that I needed to tell. And of course, I knew I had to tell my husband. And she said, "Well, would you like for me to call him?" And I said, "No." I said, "Let me call him." Bobby has always been my rock. And so I really just needed to hear his voice. Of course, he was working probably a couple, 3 hours outside of town. So I knew he couldn't get to me real fast. So our initial conversation had to be on the phone. So he was shocked, of course. Then our thoughts go to how we're going to tell our two girls. One was married at the time, one was not married. He chose that it would be best if he would tell our oldest daughter, Brooke, and then I would tell Whitney. Whitney was away at Palmetto Bible Camp at the time. And she was in college, but she was a rep for Faulkner. So she had already texted me that morning before I had ever gotten the results and wanted to know if I had heard back. 'cause if she hadn't texted me, we probably just would have waited until both girls were back,
Mhm.
home before we told them. So I had to be able to get, the phone call to her. So, I went through some friends to be able to get the message that she needed to call me, and then we went through the process of trying to get her back home because she immediately wanted to come back home. So we were able to get a friend to bring her back home, and then another friend drove her car back home at the end of the week.
Mm.
They both of our girls handled it in a very different manner. Brooke handled it very medically and wanted to know all of the ins and outs of, what stage it was, what grade it was, what treatments I was going to have,
Mm.
which at that time we really couldn't answer. And Whitney dealt with it very emotionally,
Mhm.
and was emotional a lot,
Mm.
like me. I'm
Mhm.
not really sure that Brooke maybe shed some tears in private, but not really in public.
Yeah.
So they both dealt with it very, very differently. To back up just a little bit, in December of 2018, I had had a mammogram done. A cyst was found, and I had always been from the time I was 40, I've always had my mammograms done on a regular basis. And so when they found the cyst, it was very tiny, but they needed to make sure that that's what it was.
Mm.
So I went in. There actually was a member of the church that was in radiology at the time that was able to locate the cyst on the ultrasound.
Mm.
Then the radiologist came in and drew the fluid out of it. So at that time, protocol was that I came back in 6 months. They would do another mammogram to make sure that the cyst had not refilled with fluid,
Mm.
and just to make sure that everything was still okay. So I went back in June of 2019 and had the follow up, and didn't feel like anything was gonna go wrong,
Mm.
but it did, and there was something there that they had wasn't it wasn't that they didn't see it, it wasn't there in December of
Wow.
2018. So, my oldest daughter actually was with me, and whenever I went in for this, because we just didn't think it was gonna be anything. I didn't even think that my husband needed to take off work or anything.
Mm.
So, um, the radiologist we did the mammogram, and that was when they saw it. Then she wanted to do an ultrasound. They couldn't find it on the ultrasound. So I had a glimmer of hope,
Mhm.
but the radiologist she came in to do the ultrasound herself because she said, I know something is there.
Yeah.
So she's looking at the screen very intently, and I'm looking at her, and I said, "Okay, you're scaring me
Mhm.
because I need to know what you're seeing." So she flipped the screen around, and she pointed with her finger on the screen, and she said, "This is what I'm seeing." It was a very small space, but it was very jagged, and it wasn't round and hard like what I had seen on the ultrasound with the cyst.
Oh, wow.
So, um, I I thought, okay, this to me in my mind, because it had always looked like something I had seen in pictures of what a breast cancer would look like.
Mhm.
But she then told me, she said, it's probably not anything, but she said it just wasn't there before. So she said, I want my other radiologist in the clinic here. She said, I want him to look at it just to see if he's seeing the same thing that I'm looking at. And she said, I'll call you back this afternoon. So by the time I got home, she was already calling me. And she said, the other radiologist has not come in, but she said, I've left your mammogram up on my screen.
Mm.
And she said, every time I walk in, she said, my eye goes right to that space that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
She said, so I think I would feel better if you would go ahead and have a biopsy done. She said, I really don't think it's anything, but let's do the biopsy. Okay, so we did. Went in a few days later, had the biopsy done, kind of went about my business until I get that phone call.
Mm.
And then that was when everything changed for me. And at that moment, I felt like my world stopped.
Wow. Well, it's pretty amazing how from the cyst, how that right there was just the first little eye opener. And if that cyst wasn't there, you might have, like you had mentioned to me earlier that it would have been a year before, you went back, and you never know what could happen in that time. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm super thankful that you had your family with you, and that they were there to comfort and take care of you. So you mentioned that it felt like your life just stopped. The world just stopped, and that everything became still. If you have anything to add on that, how did your life change from that point forward?
It changed in the point that I kind of always been an anxious person, and I can let if there was something that I became afraid of or I wasn't sure of, I could have anxiety over that. Anxiety is a word that's used a lot these days. But there would be times that I would not allow myself to do things
Mm.
because of the anxiety. But after I was diagnosed with the cancer, it made me realize real fast how much I had allowed anxiety to rule my life. Things that really didn't matter. For instance, I could get really nervous before flying to go on a trip.
Me too.
I would not allow myself, if we went to an amusement park, I wouldn't allow myself to get on a really big roller coaster.
Mm.
Things of where, in essence, I was denying myself some fun times because I would let the anxiety, the nervousness of it all overcome me
Wow.
and not allow me to be able to do that. But in the moment that that my world stopped, one of the first memories that I have of when my mind finally cleared was, I have made way too big of a deal about things that don't really matter.
Mm.
And now I've been diagnosed with breast cancer. And if I'm going to be able to go through this, all of this other stuff is just fun.
Mm.
And I need to be able to do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good advice, because I definitely struggle with some anxiety myself, and I've missed out on some fun and some things, like you said, that really don't matter, that we shouldn't be all uptight and nervous and worried about. So now let's transition into the battle with cancer. What was the hardest part of your journey, physically, whether that was emotionally or spiritually?
It definitely was the emotional side of it. Of course, I did wind up having to have surgery. They were able to do a lumpectomy, thank goodness. And it's funny for me to say now, but it's those type of surgeries are considered a in and out, a day surgery.
Mm.
So I went in one morning, had the lumpectomy done, was able to come home. So obviously there was some pain from the surgery, some soreness, that type of thing. It wasn't anything that was unbearable. Because the cancer was so small. In fact, when they did the biopsy and they showed it, they were able to look at it and show me again on the mammogram. The tumor itself was the size of a BB.
Wow.
So for them to even see that and to find that is another blessing.
Mm.
So it had not spread to my lymph nodes, once again, thank goodness. So they did the lumpectomy, and then I had to have 16 rounds of radiation. So I went every day for a month. So I do consider it a blessing that I didn't have to have the chemo. The radiation did cause some fatigue that was a weird fatigue for me that obviously anybody can get tired,
Mhm.
but it was a fatigue that never went away. It didn't matter if I rested extremely well in the night. I still woke up with that same fatigue, or even if I took a nap, in between when I would wake up and go to bed at night, if I took a nap in between there, I still woke up with that same fatigue. So it was a very weird feeling
Mhm.
and very annoying
Yeah.
because you
You never had energy. Wow,
correct,
yeah.
and it just didn't feel right.
Mhm.
So I was determined to keep pushing and to keep going during that time. And I had talked to the radiation oncologist, and she had told me at the time, she said it's very common what you're going through. She said once you get through it, it should take you a couple of weeks, and you should be pretty much back to normal.
Mhm.
At the end of the 16 weeks, I also had some burning which was uncomfortable. Once again, wasn't unbearable, but she was correct in my instance of where in a couple of weeks I felt good
Mm,
and I was ready to just start living life again.
mm.
So that's kind of the physical part of it. The emotional part is something that started obviously from the beginning because in my mind, uh, it took me a while to be able to wrap my brain around it. And I so bad wanted to be able to think, this is not happening.
Mm.
This is not happening. Then I would overwhelm myself of thinking, I've got to live with this for the rest of my life. Even
Mm.
after the surgery and the cancer was gone, what I was going to say earlier was when they did the biopsy, they actually got all of the tumor itself because it was so small.
Wow.
So when I went in for the lumpectomy, the doctor had to make sure that there was clear margins because there were some cancerous cells that was around the tumor, which meant it was going to continue to grow.
Yeah, wow.
So she had to get the clean margins from that, which she did. She did send lymph nodes off to pathology to be examined. They do some things as you're in the OR, to where they'll take the lymph nodes out. They can put it under some type of light
Mhm.
that you can tell if it's spread. So she was able to tell me once I came out of surgery that it was not in my lymph nodes, but just to be safe and sure, she did send them off to pathology, for them to look at
Mhm.
closely. And thank goodness it wasn't in my lymph node. But then once I was cancer free, the thought of it coming back was heavy on my
Mhm.
mind. I'll go back a little bit further or a little bit in the story of once I found out the whole anxiety of it all of there's cancer in my body. And if I wasn't careful, when I would think about it, the cancer would grow in my mind.
Mhm.
So my husband actually drew a picture of a BB, the size of what would look like a BB on a piece of paper.
Mhm.
And he said, you keep this with you. And when that starts happening, you look at that BB
Mm.
because that's how small it is. Don't let it grow in your mind.
Mhm.
I also had met with a counselor, Jeremy, that we go to church with, to, tell him what all I was going through. And he was very, very helpful and of how to, some breathing techniques of how to calm myself down. Like breathe in, count to 10 as you're breathing in, let it out, count to 10.
Mm.
And the philosophy behind that is you can't count and focus on your breath and have anxiety at the same time. Your brain doesn't allow that.
Wow, yeah.
So for those brief moments, I could calm myself down.
Mhm.
I also had a group text with a lot of my friends here at church and some of my family members that whenever I would get the anxiety could be almost debilitating of where I felt like I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't pray.
Mm.
So then I would text my friends and I would say, okay, I'm struggling. Can y'all start praying for me?
Mm.
Well, I think that's probably the first time in my life that I might have felt an immediate prayer being
Wow,
answered
yeah.
because it would bring me back down. Now, I'm human, and so it would come
Mhm.
back, but that was my go-to for a very, very long time,
Wow.
and I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah. Well, that's the power of, the church and us all being one and together, and that's super cool. So a lot of times when we're going through these battles, I mean, you mentioned it already, it was hard for you to even pray, right? And that could put some distance in between us and God. And I've been through times where I felt more distant, from God than usual. And it's usually always through the tough times, especially in your case, in this instance, it's on a much bigger scale, much larger scale. So were there times when your faith was tested, or you may have felt distance from God?
Faith was always wondered why it was me, but flipping that around, why not me?
Mm. Mhm.
You wouldn't wish that on anybody else. So it didn't, I always knew my faith was always intact. Um, and as the diagnosis began to like sink into my mind and I was able to wrap my brain around it, I did find comfort in the fact of, whether I lived or whether I died, I was okay. So I would cling to things like, that type of thing of even if.
Mm.
I didn't want the even if,
Mhm.
but even if I was still okay.
Mhm.
And I think we as Christians, sometimes we only see what's right in front of us.
Mm.
But if we can wrap our brain around what
Mhm.
if, and I'm okay, it helps that journey a lot. There were times that I did feel distant, I felt like God was distant from me. I felt like I couldn't reach
Mm.
him. I was praying, but I felt like, I'm not going to say I didn't feel like they were being heard, that the prayer wasn't being heard, but it was just it was like I wanted to feel his presence and I was numb. And I think I know it was me and I
Mhm.
know it was the diagnosis. So once again, during those times, I would, tell my family, okay, y'all pray for me, because I can't right now. I simply can't. I can remember one of well, it was the first time that we had met the surgeon, and she and I hit it off instantly. Your
Mhm.
dad was the one that put me in contact.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
But she actually was a breast cancer survivor herself. So
Wow.
we immediately bonded.
Mhm.
She still is now one of my favorite doctors and is what I consider a friend.
Mhm.
But I can remember whenever we pulled into the parking lot, and I looked at Bobby and I looked at Whitney and I said, okay, I feel like I'm going through the motions and I feel like I need to be praying, but I feel like he's distant. And so Bobby just pray
Mm.
for us.
Mhm.
And that was a comfort, a
Wow.
very comfort during those times that I felt like God was distant from
Mm.
me.
Mm. Yeah, so a few things you mentioned there, we talked about it in some of our Sunday morning classes recently. Craig, during his curriculum, something interesting that I thought he added in there was, even when it feels like the door is closed, keep knocking. It's a door for a reason. It's not a wall. It's a door. So even when you feel the most distant or feel like God's most distant, he wants us to keep knocking and keep pushing, right? And that's super cool. How did you find strength to keep going on the toughest days? What did you go to for that?
I did not want the cancer to win. And so even on those days, like I had mentioned about the fatigue, I was still working at the time. So I would get up in the morning as normal. I would go to work. I would work half a day, then go for my radiation treatments. And then my job allowed me to just come back home
Mm.
after that. So that helped a lot. My family kept me going. Um, and then I've always felt like God's gift to us is life.
Mm.
And I wanted to live. I wanted to be in my girls' lives. I wanted my husband and I to continue our good life. So I knew that if I could just get through it, that I had a really, really good chance. It was in the 90 percentile that the breast cancer won't come back. So on those days that I felt like I'm tired, just nothing. All you wanted to do was rest, but then like I had said, it didn't help any. I just kept thinking, I've got to get through it. I've got to
Mhm.
get through it. I've got to get through it.
Mm.
And so for the 16 treatments, with because you didn't go on the weekends, and I think there was one holiday that came in there. It was about a month, so relatively speaking, it wasn't a long period of time. It was just every day that you had to do it that made it seem like it was long.
Mm. Well, were there any specific scriptures or songs or prayers that gave you hope during the treatment?
I've kind of always been songs, especially, well, hymns,
Hmm.
have always hit me at the heart. And, as I've gotten older, I've realized that a lot of those songs are scripture as well.
Yeah.
Um, when I would go in for the radiation treatments, anybody that's been through radiation will tell you that they're very quick treatments.
Hmm.
They don't last a long period of time. So really and truly, the treatment itself would lasted only about 5 minutes. But see, that's just where it gets in your head again, like going in for that treatment, and then after the treatment, like, if I wasn't careful, it could be well, I wonder going into the treatment, well, I wonder if it's going to burn me this time, or wonder afterwards. It's like, well, I wonder if it's getting anything that might have been missed in the lumpectomy. So that's where
Mm.
it can play with your mind. So I started of where whatever song, hymn came into my mind was what I would sing in my mind.
Wow. Yeah.
It could have been as simple as Jesus loves me,
Hmm.
because he does.
That's right.
It could have been blue skies and rainbows,
Hmm.
because if it was a beautiful day outside, or if it wasn't, and there might have been a rainbow.
Hmm.
But then after I got through the treatments completely, it was blue skies and rainbows, regardless of what it looked like
Hmm.
outside. There was a lot of times that it might even be with me, Lord.
Hmm.
I cannot live without you. I dare not try to take one step alone. And even now, it still gives me chills thinking
Yeah.
about that.
Wow.
Probably my all-time favorite, and still is my favorite, which is found in Psalm 51, is "Create in me a clean heart."
Mm-hmm.
We know that that is the scripture that David prayed, or the scripture is the prayer that David prayed
Hmm.
after Nathan had confronted him about Bathsheba. And you want a clean heart. And especially when I was going through something like that, you tend to think about your soul a whole lot more.
Hmm.
So I wanted that clean heart, but I didn't want God's presence to leave me ever.
Wow. Well, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing that. That's something I'm going to keep in mind, and I encourage others to keep in mind to go to those psalms or those songs and scripture, because they can really get you through some tough days and some tough battles. Can you share? I know you shared. You got a group of ladies who prayed for you, and you felt God's presence and relief immediately. Can you share a moment, whether it's that or another moment, when you felt God's presence most clearly in your journey?
It I think it was a continuing journey. I don't know that there was one
Mm.
specific, but even since the diagnosis, it's been 6 years now. Things I'm not near as emotional about it as I used to be. For a while, I would always get emotional when I would talk about it.
Mm.
Now I can kind of get through the story
Mhm.
without being emotional. But for the first 2 years, after the diagnosis, I had to go back, every 6 months to have a mammogram. And, they that was extremely high anxiety for me. So even during those times, even after the diagnosis, I still kept that text message group going.
Wow.
And I'm getting ready to, tomorrow it's the day. And then
Mm.
as I would go in, okay, pray, pray, pray right now, pray, because I can't. And it was still that
Mm.
I can't pray because I had allowed myself to get so worked up.
Mm.
Um, funny story is once I retired from work, I decided that I wanted to do something to give back. That I felt like that if God had allowed me to come through the diagnosis, then I wanted to be able to help those who were walking the journey or were getting ready to walk the journey.
Mm.
So I volunteer at Augusta, or it's MCG now,
Mhm.
um, in the Women's Breast Health Center, which is where the mammograms are done,
Yeah.
which I think is interesting because I always had a saying of mammograms can make my sassy pants hit the floor.
Oh, I can imagine.
And so when I wanted to do something, it's just amazing to me that God was like, okay, well, let's put you right here
Mm,
so that maybe you can feel more comfort when you come in for your mammograms, but yet you're helping others through that.
wow.
Because I usually can tell pretty much right off the bat the anxiety of somebody coming in. And especially the ones that are coming in for the first time, or if they've gotten a call back and they're looking for
Mhm,
something.
mhm,
And I do take the opportunity to tell them part of my story. I also take the time to ask them if they are a praying person. And if
mhm,
they are, would it be okay for me to pray with them?
mm.
95% of the people want me to pray for them
Wow.
and with them,
Mhm,
and are thankful that when they leave, they come back to me and they'll say, "Thank you for doing that."
mhm. Wow. So what I'm hearing is you when you went in for your checkup or your appointments, the lady that was with you had been through the same thing that you were going through now, and she was able to be a comfort for you, and now you're that for other people, which is super cool. And you place yourself around people who will support and who will be with you and pray for you. And again, I think that's another thing we can all work on is placing ourselves around the right people and people that will be there for you and pray for you and comfort you through those times. So that's really cool. How did your faith community, family, or friends support you during this season? I know you've hit on this some, but is there anything else?
I received so many cards, so many texts, people just telling me they were, and sometimes those are easy words to say.
Mhm.
But when somebody would tell me, "I'm really praying for
Mm,
you," it hit to the core of me
mhm,
because it was just so comforting to me during that time. There was nothing that anybody could do to make my cancer go away.
mm.
I had to walk that journey by myself, but they could give me the assurance that they were praying for me and that God was listening to that.
Wow, wow. That's super powerful. So I wanted to jump into some lessons and growth. What has this journey taught you about God's faithfulness?
Looking back on my life, God has always been faithful, but I don't think that I recognized how faithful until I went through this. What could have been something that was life threatening turned out to be probably one of my greatest blessings in my spiritual journey.
Mm,
And sometimes it's a little bit hard for me to explain because, like I've said, I've always been faithful, but I never knew how faithful he could be to me
wow. Yeah.
until this happened.
Mm,
And it could have gone the opposite way.
yeah.
It very well could have, but for whatever reason, he didn't allow it to go that way.
Mm,
So it's made me just love him even that much more.
wow. Yeah, that's super powerful, and it's crazy how going through some of your darkest moments and hardest times that tends to be when your faith increases or you start to understand God's presence and his faithfulness towards you a little more. And that's exactly what happened there. How has your perspective on life and faith changed since going through cancer?
I just want to live life. Once again, I think I mentioned, gave us the gift of life. He gave us the gift of his creation. We need to enjoy it
Mm-hmm.
with living for him, through him, and spreading the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
But it's meant to be enjoyed. It's not meant to feel like that I'm only here until I die and I go to heaven. It's meant to be enjoyed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I actually mentioned on the panel is, a lot of people here, you're going to go through this, it's the narrow path, right? It's a narrow path and it's hard. You're persecuted, all these things. You hear all this. To be a Christian, you're going to go through all these hard things. But that's not all the time, right? We have a lot of, it's just a blessing to be here on earth, right? God gave us a chance at glory with him. And that hope is something we could all cling to a little more. This one's probably a little bit tougher of a question, but I just wanted to see your thoughts or hear your opinion on this. If you could sum up your testimony in one word or phrase, what would it be and why?
Thankfulness. I can't always say that I'm thankful that I was diagnosed with breast cancer, but I can say that I'm thankful for the opportunities that it has presented me with being able to help other women
Mm-hmm.
that might be facing that same disease, and being that help of, you can make it through this. It may be the worst treatment you've ever experienced, but you can make it through it.
Wow. Yeah, and something you keep mentioning is, again, God has been with you. Your church family has been with you. I don't know how people get through these things without God and without a church family. It just, even hearing you clarifies that more. It's just so important, and we can be those voices, right? To spread and help and encourage others. And that's actually our section. Our last section is encouragement for others. So what would you say to someone who is currently facing cancer?
I think you just be encouraging, because it can be a long, drawn out journey, depending on what your treatment plan is. One of the things that I've had several friends that have gone through breast cancer since I have, and I know the ones that have had to have chemo, just being there, texting, if I can't be there in person. I have gone and sat with a couple of people during the time that they were having chemo, just to offer company, just to offer that conversation that doesn't necessarily have to deal with the chemo that you're going through, or that it doesn't have to deal with it. You don't have to be talking about cancer all the time.
Right.
You can allow something else to infiltrate their mind, to where it's not just that's what they're thinking of. If I couldn't be there in person, or wasn't able to be there in person, just even a text beforehand. If I'm thinking about you, praying about you, you can do this. I just think being there for someone and showing up for them, sometimes that's all they need. They've got to walk the journey themselves. But knowing that they've got somebody there physically sometimes helps.
Yeah, that's super important. This question's kind of for me, but I know there's a lot of other people who haven't gone through cancer or don't have family that have went through cancer. My papa, he's still battling. And it can be awkward to talk about. It can be hard, because it's so deep, what encouragement would you offer to family members or friends supporting a loved one through cancer?
Don't be afraid to talk about it. It's like I said, all conversations don't have to deal with your cancer, but don't shy away from it. Let them know that you're aware of what they're going through and that you're there to help them, because sometimes ignoring it gets awkward.
Mhm.
And then sometimes if you're not careful, it can make, especially if somebody is struggling really bad on that particular day or for a while, if you ignore it, it can come across as if you don't care.
Mm.
Always let somebody know that you care. And even if you've never been through a cancer
Mhm.
diagnosis, and you can't understand what they're going through, just you simply telling them, I'm thinking of you.
Mm.
What can I do to help you? And follow through if there is something that they tell you.
Mhm. Well, I'll definitely apply that. That's super good to know and understand when walking alongside people, friends, family who are battling cancer. Not to put you on the spot, but if the church could do one thing better, because I know all churches are looking for ways to be better, and especially with harder situations like this. If the church could do one thing better to walk alongside people battling cancer, what would that be?
I think probably overall, in my instance, the church did really well
Mm.
with it. I think, sometimes cancer it's very personal. And it's like what you were saying, sometimes conversations, somebody might think that can be a little awkward or whatever.
Mhm.
But if you find that somebody is, in my instance, if you know of somebody that's going through breast cancer,
Mm.
I've had people say, well, have you talked to Cindy Pace?
Mm.
So point them
Mm.
in the direction of somebody that may have gone through that type of
Oh,
cancer.
yeah.
Even people, even just women who it might not be breast cancer, but just knowing that I have fought cancer, they may be fighting another cancer, but yet us talking together.
Mm.
So that probably is the one thing of, if your elders find out about it, if a minister finds out about it, point them in the direction. If it's somebody that they may not, if somebody didn't know me, introduce them. Set
Mm.
up a conversation that can be had.
Yeah, one thing that's always said, but I don't know necessarily all the ways applied, is that there's someone in the church has gone through this, and that's for anything, right? And I think that could be applied more. I think we need to point people in the direction, where they can be mentored or comforted by people who have been through similar things, because that makes things a lot easier, right? Um, okay, well, to kind of wrap it up, my last question for you is, what does hope look like to you now after walking through this journey?
Hope definitely takes on a different meaning with cancer.
Mm.
First and foremost, you have that hope in
Mm.
Christ. And it's just like I had said at previously in this podcast, of even if it didn't turn out to where my life on earth would be extended, my life in heaven was just beginning. And
Mm.
that hope of that takes away a lot of
Mhm.
anxiety.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I want to thank everyone for joining us today on Voices of the Church, and I want to give a heartfelt thank you to Cindy Pace for so openly sharing her journey of walking with Christ through the battle with cancer. Her testimony reminds us that even in seasons of pain and uncertainty, God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. Just as 2 Corinthians 12:9 declares, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." If you're listening today and you or a loved one are walking through cancer or any kind of trial, may Cindy's story encourage you to cling to the God who never leaves us, even if it feels like he may, and who fills us with living hope. Be sure to stay connected with us on Instagram and Facebook at Voices of the Church Podcast for future episodes and conversations of faith. Until next time, may we continue to walk in faith, live by the word, and encourage one another as members of the body of Christ.